Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, former NFL scout and currently of Sports Info Solutions, joined by Aaron Schatz, the godfather of football analytics and the founder of Football Outsiders. As always, our versatile producer, Justin Stein, is with us on the controls, and later in the show, we will have John Verros on for his injury insights. But Aaron, let's get right into it because we've got a huge matchup for the biggest game of this week. What do you have for us as far as that goes?
Yeah, we're going to concentrate this week on games. The first couple of games are really big for Super Bowl odds, more than they are for the playoffs, because the most important game for the Super Bowl is New England at Baltimore. Obviously, New England at this point is almost virtually assured of making the playoffs. In our 30,000 simulations, there are only 6 simulations where the Patriots miss the playoffs. But this game is really important for the Baltimore Ravens. So the Patriots reach the Super Bowl 63% of the time if they win this game, 59% if they lose, which is surprisingly not much of a difference. That's how big the lead is that they have for the number 1 seed in the AFC. But Baltimore really has something to prove. They reach the Super Bowl 13.7% of the time if they win, 8.4% of the time if they lose, and it's really a chance for them to make a statement that they belong in the discussion with the Patriots at the top of the AFC.
Yeah, it stands to reason there. I think that New England is really, you think of the Chiefs as their main competition, and the Chiefs are now behind them by a couple of games in the loss column, and it's almost like teams are playing for that 2 seed now behind the Patriots. Meanwhile, Baltimore, they can really put themselves in that conversation with a win here, I think, as you were saying.
Everybody in the AFC at this point is playing for the 2 seed. 90% of the time in our simulations, New England gets the number 1 seed. They have a 2.5 game lead for the number 1 seed right now. But you've got Kansas City at 5-3, Indy at 5-2, Houston at 5-3, Baltimore at 5-2, even Buffalo at 5-2. Obviously, Buffalo won't be able to get the 2 seed, but those teams all have pretty good records, and 4 of them are going to be fighting it out.
Man, Halloween's supposed to be fun, but between the weather right now and you telling me the Patriots have a 90% chance of getting the 1 seed, it's downright depressing
today. That is fun
today.
for me.
All right. Well, I wanted to talk about this game, and I wanted to start off with what I think is the most interesting element, maybe one of the most interesting things just going on in the NFL overall right now, and that is Lamar Jackson. Bryce Rossler is putting together a really interesting article that's going to drop tomorrow, Friday, about Lamar Jackson and some of the insights that he pulled out from that one. Talk about their running game and the impact that he's had on their running game. Their designed runs, whether or not they include him as the actual ball carrier, they're averaging a whopping 12 expected points added per 100 attempts on designed runs, which is double the figure of the next highest team in the league, who's the Houston Texans. They also lead the league in rushing total points earned by a large margin. Then 38% of those designed runs have been on some form of option scheme, whether it's zone read, power read, speed option, or the rare triple option, and they average 18 expected points added per 100 attempts on those plays. So what Bryce really started looking into was the impact that Lamar Jackson as a ball carrier, as an extra threat on the defense that has had on the Baltimore run game as a whole, and what he's done there. The numbers really speak for it. And then shout out to Keegan Abdu, who had the original Lamar Jackson piece as a Football Outsider special a couple years ago, looking at how teams really couldn't hang in man coverage, and especially cover 2 man when they were playing against teams with Lamar Jackson as a quarterback. And it's played out this year. 5 of the Ravens' 7 opponents thus far have played considerably less man in their matchups against Jackson than they have in their other games this season. So the Seahawks, Chiefs, Cardinals, Dolphins, and Browns all toned down their usage of man against Jackson. And I think that leads right into what we're going to want to talk about next, which is kind of the obvious thing. Patriots love to play man.
There aren't a lot of teams that play more man than the Patriots. So it's going to be very interesting to see if they change their scheme. First of all, how do they try to defend Jackson? Do they do it with a spy, or do they do it kind of the way that the Chargers did in the playoffs last year, which is by bringing up lots of guys to the line of scrimmage, extra fast guys? And the other is, do they play more coverage? Do they play more zone coverage in this game than they usually do, or do they stick to their usual single high and man coverage and trust that if they have 5 or 6 defenders down near the box, with 4 guys in coverage and then a single high safety, that those guys can stop Jackson if they have a spy or something?
Yeah, I think that's the really interesting thing. All eyes on Belichick, seeing how he's going to stop. Like everybody always has the perception that he's going to stop the thing that you do best. So you think he's going to sell out to stop the Ravens' run game. That's where they've been really strong this year. The Patriots' run defense hasn't necessarily been a strength of theirs, especially compared to their pass defense. So does he sell out to do that? And I actually think, to your point, I'm not so sure that that's the direction that he'll go. You look at Lamar Jackson and his stats this year against man and zone. So much more zone than man. He's seen about twice as many zone snaps than man snaps. But against man, 8.7 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's second in quarterback rating against man at 118. Against zone, just 7.6 yards per attempt. That's still pretty good, but we'll say 7.6 yards per attempt, 6 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He's 22nd in quarterback rating at just 85 against zone. So he has been better against man. So there are a few kind of conflicting things going on here. I personally would put my money on I'm not putting any money on Belichick doing anything, but I would predict that based on the success that Lamar has had against man versus zone this year, I think if I'm Belichick, I'm actually more nervous about Lamar Jackson beating me than the Baltimore run game per se beating me. And so finding ways to mix up the coverage and frustrate Lamar Jackson, I think will be more of what we see than I think what some people might expect, which would just be, okay, we're going to sell out to stop the run. We're going to play our man coverage behind and sell out that way. Think about the Belichick, the old Giants Super Bowl where encouraging the other team to run the ball. I think that could be a little nugget of what goes on here in this game.
Although I will say I went and looked at the Patriots' numbers versus quarterback runs over the last couple years. Now, okay, with the caveat that last year's defense overall was not as good as this year's defense, and that there's some small sample size going on here. But last year, they were 23rd in DVOA against quarterback runs. This year, they're 29th, although that's only 11 carries for 80 yards. But still, they're sort of known. One of the reasons why I know that Patriots fans fear Deshaun Watson, for example, is the quarterback runs that he was able to constantly get away from the pressure back when the last couple of times the Patriots have played Houston. So I think that the Patriots have shown a little bit of a weakness towards running quarterbacks and scrambling quarterbacks over the last couple of years.
Well, chicken and egg. I think they've been a man-heavy team, and the man-heavy defense is going to be open you up to those scrambles more. I think specifically, separating out quarterback design runs from scrambles, where the Patriots, I think, have been hurt, have been those scrambles. And it makes sense if you think about it kind of in that context.
Right. The 11 carries from this year are 8 scrambles, a sneak, and then 2 designed runs. So it's mostly scrambles.
And if we just take a step back and just talk about just how good they've been this year, the Patriots pass defense has 223 pass defense total points saved. That's over 50 points more than the next best pass defense, the 49ers. And then just to talk about how much those two teams have separated, we've talked about it in terms of DVOA before. In terms of the positive percentage allowed, so plays with a positive EPA passing, the Niners have allowed 32% positive plays passing, the Patriots 33%, and the next best pass defense is the Bills at 43%. So that's just what kind of craziness they've been and how different these two defenses have been from the rest of the league.
The gap in DVOA right now between number 2 San Francisco on defense and number 3 Denver is larger than the gap between number 3 Denver and number 31 Cincinnati.
That's just outrageous.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
We can't expect the defenses to carry that level throughout the year. This has to
regress to the regression
somewhat, especially because we're talking about defense and not offense, and how predicted that's been in the past. So I want to just kind of be on record here saying, wow, that's crazy. And also, I think you and I would both agree it's unsustainable how crazy it is.
Yeah, no, the only defense that's ever sustained this level for a full season is the 91 Eagles. And the Patriots and the 49ers. It's not going to be this good all year. But I don't think that there's no consistency to defense overall. In other words, I don't think that the chance that there's just as an equal a chance that they'll have bad defense as good defense for the rest of the year. I think the likelihood is still that the Patriots and 49ers are going to be the 2 best defenses in the league for the rest of the year, just not to this extent.
Right. And certainly when we look at the end of the year totals, I'll be curious to see if we just split the first half versus second half, who those second half defenses that kind of rise to the top are. Obviously that'll have a big impact on the playoffs.
Well, one defense that has gotten a lot better in the last few weeks is the Baltimore Ravens. They were 30th in our ratings in September and 6th in October. So while their offense has actually declined a bit in October, their defense has really improved in October, and that's going to be more difficult for that Patriots offense to go up against. The Patriots offense, which, by the way, looks kind of mediocre. They're only 15th in DVOA right now, and they have not been very good over the last 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, they've struggled. And I mean, if you look especially at their rushing offense, we have them dead last in rushing total points earned behind even the Dolphins, just a 38% positive EPA percent for the Patriots on running plays.
Yeah, it's not been a good running game, and the passing game doesn't go deep very often. And without Josh Gordon, I don't really know who the deep threat is in this team. I guess N'Keal Harry is going to be activated this week, but he's got to be fifth on the depth chart at this point at wide receiver. I mean, yeah, I don't know where the deep threat is here.
Right. Just that, they're kind of a work in progress on the offensive side of the ball. We talked about the Ravens kind of a work in progress on the defensive side of the ball. One other team that I think is certainly a work in progress on the defensive side of the ball, the Kansas City Chiefs, and they are in our next big matchup.
Absolutely. I want to just hit one more thing on the Ravens and Patriots, which is a huge gap between these teams is special teams, and especially field goal kicking. And the Patriots do not want this to turn into a battle of field goal kickers because Baltimore has the best one that's ever played the game, and the Patriots are on their third of the year, Nick Folk, who was last seen in the AAF.
Yeah, there's a joke to be said about the fat lady singing and Justin Tucker with opera, but it's a tired, dreary day, so I don't have it in me.
Minnesota at Kansas City. That's our number 2 game of the week. Minnesota reaches the Super Bowl 9% of the time if they win, 5.3% if they lose. Kansas City, 17.8% of the time if they win, 12.8% if they lose. And this is, I think, the most interesting stat about Kansas City is how little offensive DVOA they've lost over the last 2 weeks since Matt Moore came in. If you look at the first 6 weeks and then you look at weeks 7 and 8, which is mostly Moore, a little bit of Mahomes in there, 55% pass in weeks 1 to 6, 49% in weeks 7 to 8, so almost as good. They've actually declined more in the last 2 weeks running the ball than they have passing the ball. That is a testament to Andy Reid and his ability to scheme and the ability of the receivers on that team to be track stars.
Yeah, the offense is special. It's interesting you mentioned that because I had pulled a different statistic looking at the positive percentage and had Mahomes at 52%, which what I thought was a predictable drop to just 44% with Matt Moore. But I think what that probably brings out when the difference between DVOA and the positive percent is maybe the big plays have still been there with Matt Moore, even if the down-to-down consistency hasn't been as good as it was with Mahomes.
That sounds about right because they've gotten guys open deep on a couple of plays.
Yep, they definitely, you hit a few to Tyreek Hill and Kelsey, and all of a sudden that'll certainly help the overall
other thing
output.
is opponent adjustment because Denver is the number 3 defense, and Moore was putting up numbers against Denver.
Right, and he's been solid. Matt Moore, I think somebody who is pretty much an ideal backup, somebody you can bring in for a situation like this, get you through a few weeks. And then the focus then again switches to the other side of the ball, and it's that defense. And that's a big question for Kansas City, I think, is now they kind of have to, almost concede the number 1 overall seed to the Patriots, as we were talking about. They're really going to have to get the defense playing better if they're going to go into Foxborough. It's not just going to be able to be Mahomes doing it by himself, as we saw last year.
Here's what's crazy. Once you throw in opponent adjustments, Kansas City right now ranks 4th in DVOA pass defense. They're not, without the opponent adjustments, they're like 9. But with the opponent adjustments, they're like 4th. They're 30th against the run. And normally I would say, obviously it's better to be good against the pass than it is to be against the run. But teams are taking advantage of that by running against Kansas City a lot. So they're 17th overall because of the run-pass ratio. And Minnesota is a team that is going to take advantage of this and run against Kansas City all day long.
Yep. Nobody, higher volume, higher efficiency run game than Minnesota. And they've just been so good running the ball and done it a ton. And they've really married that with the play action game. And we've seen it come through in big ways for Kirk Cousins. He has quietly moved up to 5th in passing total points earned so far this year. And unsurprisingly, he leads the NFL in passing points earned on play action. So we saw him kind of speak out. He had the Ringer article in the offseason talking about how he bought into the effect of play action. We've seen the offense they've really embraced there being that outside zone, bootleg play action stuff, and they're running it really well. I don't hear any complaints about Kirk Cousins coming out of Minnesota these days.
No, he's been fantastic. He's also amazingly good in when people do completion percentage above expectation type stats. He comes out phenomenal, and you have to ask yourself how much of that is Cousins and how much of that is receivers, because completion percentage above expectation doesn't separate out for the quality of the receivers, and obviously he's got good receivers there, but it's not like his whole receiver core is fantastic. I mean, I don't think anybody thinks of Olabisi Johnson as this fantastic third receiver.
No, yeah, we've got some Viking lovers around the office who will try to argue to me that Thielen's a top 10 receiver, and I don't buy that. I buy he and Diggs are both top 20 receivers to me. I buy Diggs as a top 10 receiver potentially, but I think that it's not like we're talking about Julio Jones running around for them out there, and you got to give him some
Cousins
credit.
is still throwing it to some players who are not Thielen and Diggs, and he's got a strong completion percentage to those players as well.
Right. And how about Kyle Rudolph really embracing his role in the run game as well as the pass game this year? I think he's done a really nice job being kind of a jack of all trades for them, just as Harrison Smith is on defense.
Yep. Rudolph, not good for your fantasy team, but it's good for their running game. So if you have Dalvin Cook, it's good.
So I'm really looking forward to seeing this matchup. I think it'll be really interesting to see how that Minnesota offense that's been so efficient this year. But I think that from a personnel standpoint, everybody still in the back of their mind has some questions about Kirk Cousins. I don't think we're buying that he's a tier 1 type quarterback in the NFL. So I'm really looking at, can the Spagnuolo defense, will they be able to handle the run game and the play action game of this Minnesota team, or are they still a work in progress?
And there's still a small chance that Mahomes will play. I don't know what the medical situation is, but he's apparently practicing as the number 2 quarterback right now, and there is a chance he's going to play. If I were them, I would say rest another week, hold out of an NFC game that doesn't matter for tiebreakers, and bring him back next week. But they know his health situation better than I do.
Yep, couldn't say it better.
All right. The most important game for the playoffs, as opposed to the Super Bowl, is another AFC contest, and that is Houston and Jacksonville. And Houston is in 79% of the time with a win, 49% with a loss. Jacksonville, 59% of the time with a win, 27% of the time with a loss. The Jags are kind of underrated right now. They are actually the best team in the AFC South by DVOA. They are 11th overall, and they're kind of well-rounded. They're 11th on offense, 14th on defense, and 10th on special teams. But they've gone 1-3 in one-score games, which is why they're 4-4, while Houston is 5-3 and Indy is 5-2.
Yeah, I think if we start off talking about Jacksonville, I think they've really stumbled into something here with Gardner Minshew. Credit to them for taking him late, but I think he's a win-with quarterback. I think that over the course of the games that we've seen him play, we've seen him go against a lot of quarterbacks like a Sam Darnold, who we're kind of not sure about and still trying to figure out about. Gardner Minshew, every time you see him, he's a competent quarterback, no matter who he's lined up against as the other signal caller. I think he can be a win-with guy. He's 15th in passing total points earned over the last 4 weeks. So I don't think he's going to be a win because of type player. I don't ever think you're going to put the team on his shoulders. But, hey, what have the Jaguars been looking for the past 5+ years as they've had this defense that was really good and now is hopefully still has enough of those pieces in line. All of a sudden, this one piece where they had the Bortles mess in there for years and years, in the 6th round, Gardner Minshew comes out, and I think he's the guy going forward. I think they actually have some interesting flexibility with Nick Foles.
Jaguars are number 8 in passing DVOA. So, I mean, absolutely. I think Minshew, it's been a half a season, but it's not like you can argue, well, they put a lot of stuff around him, and so he's in an easy situation. He's not in an easy situation. The guys in the past haven't been able to do, DJ Chark is having a nice breakout year and everything, but nobody looks at Jacksonville and goes, oh, that's a really good offensive line and that's a really great group of receivers. I mean, he's absolutely doing it. And the others team, Houston, their defense, is 23rd against the pass in DVOA, but 5th against the run. And that's with J.J. Watt. So they're probably going to get weaker against the pass without J.J. Watt to rush the passer. So this is a phenomenal matchup for Minshew.
Yeah, we were talking earlier in the week about your Madden All-Stars for the month of October. And J.J. Watt, when just looking at the leaderboards of the pressures throughout the NFL, nobody was anywhere near him throughout the month of October. So such a tough loss. Really going to miss him.
I will say for people who follow the Madden All-Stars, we don't get to pick any player we want. We can only pick players who haven't had a ratings increase recently, because obviously we would have given to J.J. Watt for October if we could pick just any player. But we're sort of limited in who we can pick. Now, here's an interesting thing about the Houston defense, because there is one place where this is weakness against a surprising weakness. Houston is the worst defense in the league against passes in the short middle area of the field, twice as bad as the team that's ranked 31st. But Minshew is actually near the bottom of the league in those passes. Only Mayfield has a worse DVOA rating on passes in the short middle area. Minshew is much stronger to the sides of the field than he is to the middle.
Very interesting stuff. He has been, I would say, a prototypical game manager in the best sense of the word so far this year. And you'd think that he'd be taking advantage more of those types of throws. You'd think Mayfield would too, based on just the types of players that they are. So interesting little tidbit there.
You think a lot of things about Mayfield this year, but that's a whole other discussion.
All right, let's flip it around on the other side of the ball. Let's talk about the Houston offense. Deshaun Watson has been absolutely ridiculous. He's getting kicked in the face, throwing touchdowns. Over the last month, the last 4 games, he's second in passing total points earned, bringing himself squarely into the MVP conversation. And the Jaguars pose an interesting matchup because somehow they've fared better on opponent dropbacks without Jalen Ramsey than with him. So, small sample size, beware, of course. But in 2019, they allowed opposing offenses to average 16 expected points added per dropback with Ramsey on the field. Without him on the field, they're averaging negative 12 expected points added per dropback. So, like I said, beware small sample, but something interesting there. The Jaguars' pass defense might be rounding out into a form that could be a tough matchup for Watson.
It's interesting. Jacksonville allows the most yardage per game to number 1 receivers. So DeAndre Hopkins should have a really big game.
Huge.
But
yeah.
they're 5th in DVOA because of the interceptions that they get on passes to number 1 receivers.
Fascinating.
They're also 6th in pressure rate on defense. And of course, Houston, this is one where it's on the quarterback as much as, if not more than the offensive line. Houston is 28th in pressure rate on offense.
So if Houston wins this one, they can really separate themselves from Jacksonville. But Jacksonville with the win, as you mentioned, based on your playoff probability, they would hop Houston in terms of being the more likely team to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, the AFC right now is you could end up with 3 AFC South teams in the playoffs. I mean, there's a lot of teams that are in the running, but the leaders for that wild card spot are going to be the AFC South teams plus Buffalo. Buffalo has a very easy remaining schedule, plus they got to start 5-2. So even though Buffalo is not a good team, they've got sort of the inside track on the wild card.
Speaking of easy schedules, and since you primed me with the thought about Baker Mayfield, any chance that with the Browns schedule easing up, we could see maybe a reversal of fortunes from how it's looked so bad in Cleveland throughout the first half of the season?
Hell to the yes. I actually wrote a whole column for ESPN Plus that will be probably up by the time our podcast is available on schedule strength for the second half of the season. And Cleveland's schedule strength is, I think only the Jets have an easier schedule, and that's because they play Miami twice. I mean, Cleveland still gets to play Cincinnati twice. I believe that they still get to play Miami. We are absolutely set up for a Baker Mayfield puts it together in the second half narrative. But at 2-5, there's just too many teams ahead of them for them to get back into the playoff race.
I agree with you there. All right. Anything else you wanted to discuss with these games?
The other, as long as we're talking about not these games, but as long as we're talking about AFC teams and on the outskirts of the playoff race, folks should check out the new Film Room column from Derek Klassen on FO about what Oakland is doing right. We have not talked a lot about Oakland this year, but Oakland has a top 10 offense by DVOA. And at 3-4 with a very easy remaining schedule, they are absolutely in the wild card race.
Wow, amazing just the difference between the AFC and the NFC, the teams that are competing for that
And
last
the
spot.
NFC, if you're 4-4, it's like it's over. I mean, poor Philadelphia and Dallas are desperate to beat each other because it's going to be so hard to get a second wild card. In the AFC, we're like 3-4. You're in it.
Yeah, amazing stuff. All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll be back with John Verros' Injury Insights. Sports Info Solutions is excited to announce the launch of its public-facing site, SISDataHub.com. The new SIS Data Hub is free for all to use and features detailed player pages and leaderboards that provide some of the best information available. In addition to all of the standard statistics, here you'll find proprietary data collected by SIS Video Scouts, like on-target percentage for quarterback, pressure rates for edge rushers, blown blocks for offensive linemen, and more. You'll also find advanced metrics calculated from all of that data, like independent quarterback rating, total points earned, total points saved, and many, many more statistics, from adjusted blown block percent to positive percentage for receivers, quarterbacks, running backs, broken tackles, air yards, and more. For the most avid football fanatics, a pro version of the Data Hub is also available, which contains everything from the free version as well as filters to split by situation, personnel, and almost anything else imaginable, coverage scheme, run direction, and more. The Data Hub Pro also includes team leaderboards, NCAA data, and the ability to download all data as CSV files. You can register for a free 7-day trial by going to pro.sisdatahub.com. Up next, we've got John Verros on for his Injury Insights. John, what do you got for us this week?
Unfortunately, this past Monday, James Conner sprained the AC joint in his right shoulder. There's a chance that he can play through it this upcoming week, and the Steelers might need him to do so due to the other injuries that they have going on right now.
Yeah, kind of a crazy backfield situation there. So we'll try to run down what's going on there.
So on October 8th, Jalen Samuels underwent arthroscopic knee surgery to fix the meniscus in his knee, and he's just now on the mend to get back, and he's supposed to be available this week. But following suit, Benny Snell, unfortunately, this past week had the exact same injury, and today it was reported that he also underwent a scope on his knee. So they're a little bit banged up in the backfield there. Now, all of this is kind of put to the wayside if Conner is able to play. And in my mind, similar to Josh Jacobs for the Raiders this past week, who was able to play through an AC joint sprain, Conner may also be able to do that. If it's a grade 1 sprain or just an overstretching of the ligaments in his AC joint, then he might be able to take a painkiller and get back in there. But if it's a grade 2 or a partial tear, we might be looking at him being sidelined for several weeks, and it could be the Jalen Samuels show.
Right. So not sure what to expect from Conner depending on the severity. Jalen Samuels coming back after about 3 weeks, but now Benny Snell looking about missing probably about that same amount of time coming up.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
All right. And then going across to the other side of the NFL, Brandin Cooks took a kind of nasty hit, another concussion for him. I'm nervous to even ask you, but what can you tell us about that situation?
Yeah, he took a nasty hit in the first quarter, exited, and then was immediately ruled out with a concussion. This is his fourth documented concussion in the past 2 seasons, so a kind of scary situation going on here, similar to, I guess you could say, Jordan Reed has currently going on. Now, there's also a documented concussion for Cooks back in 2015. So that would be his 5th concussion within the last 4 seasons. It's a scary situation. Fortunately, the Rams are on a bye this coming week, so it kind of affords them some more time. And with this time off, they've actually sent Brandon to the University of Pittsburgh's Medical Center. And UPMC is worldly known for being some of the top dogs in their concussion research and treatment. Now, they won't just treat concussions based off of severity. In fact, they prefer to do it based off of symptoms or what you're feeling. For instance, if you're having balance issues or if you're having migraines or if you're having vision problems, they'll treat you and have a different rehab for you based off of what exactly you're feeling. And they think that treating them based off of symptom is much more effective than any sort of other kind of protocol that most other centers are doing currently. So
that's interesting. I would totally expect them to look for brain activity in certain areas to return to a baseline. But you're saying even more than that, they're concerned with the actual symptoms and how that can kind of play out in terms of re-injury or being able to kind of recover.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So it's all based off of, they have it broken down into 6 different types of concussions, and their types are based off of what you're feeling symptomatically.
That's super interesting stuff. So you got to think, you're worried, obviously, the CTE risk with somebody like that with the repeated concussions. Part of me almost wants to say like shut it down for the year and figure out at that point, even as great a player as he is, hard as that is to say. But hopefully, it seems like if anybody's going to figure it out, he's got the right team on it.
Yeah, exactly. He's in the right hands. And again, they have this bye week, so they can really settle down and figure out what exactly should be the course of action going forward. So hopefully we'll hear some more reports after this coming week, and we can get a better idea of what's going on and how they're feeling about it.
Scary stuff. All right, John, thanks for coming on today. Always great having you.
Hey, I appreciate it, Matt.
Everybody's favorite baseball publication is back and ready to help you through the offseason. The 2020 Bill James Handbook is available now from actisports.com. This year's big feature, a look at our new part system, which provides the best publicly available evaluation of infielder defense out there. Curious about which infielders are really the best at playing in the field? We've got you covered. Also, check out the winners of the 2019 Fielding Bible Award. Essays on pace of play, the Hall of Fame, and more from Bill James and the Sports Info Solutions team of research experts. We've got 2020 pitcher and hitter projections, complete career data on every major leaguer and top prospect, and every leaderboard you could possibly want. That's the 2020 Bill James Handbook, available at bookstores now, at actisports.com, or wherever you order books online.
Thank you to all of our listeners. You can find us on Twitter. I'm at Matt Mano, and he's at FO_A Shots. You can follow at SportsInfo_SIS and at FB Outsiders, and on Instagram at SportsInfoSolutions. From my co-host Aaron Schatz, our injury expert John Verros, our producer Justin Stein, and our researcher Bryce Rossler, I'm Matt Manocherian, and thank you for joining us for the latest episode of the Off the Charts Football Podcast.